And with word on the street, we're now joined by Mr. Gerry Dulac of the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette. What a big game Sunday night between these two teams, Gerry. How much animosity is there between the Steelers and the Ravens?
Well, it's like Hines Ward always says, Randy, that he says, we don't like them. In fact, we hate them. And they kind of play that way against the Ravens. It's always a game with a little bit of an edge. Both teams always play with a chip on their shoulder. The Steelers always like to play that way, and so do the Ravens, whether they're playing each other. But playing down in Baltimore, too. Obviously, the Ravens won the first meeting in the final 40 seconds. They've won 6 of the last 7 in Baltimore. But Ben Roethlisberger has had a lot of success against the Ravens, and he's actually won his last 5 starts against Baltimore. And, of course, he didn't play in that first meeting because he was on that 4-game suspension. And all the Steelers had to do in that game was make 1 first down in the final minute and a half, and they didn't. They went 3 plays and out, and they had to punt. And on the punt, there was a 10-yard penalty, I believe, against Kieran Fox. Baltimore got the ball at the 40, and it was 4 pass plays by Joe Flacco, and then over the top to T.J. Houshmandzadeh on the winner. And that's the difference between the Steelers maybe being 9-2 as opposed to 8-3 right now. They'd be in control of the division.
Now, Hines Ward this week also referenced Big Ben's success against the Ravens. To what do you attribute that?
You know, I think it's his ability, Randy, as always, to keep the Steelers competitive, keep them in games, and then pull it out when you have to. You know, his numbers in those games aren't staggering. I don't think he has a passer rating over 100 in any of those, but I think it's just his ability to be able to navigate a game in which the Steelers hang close. You know, they're rarely blown out, the New England game this year being an exception. Their defense keeps them in games, and his ability to pull games out at the end is, you know, one of his great calling cards. And I think that's what he's been able to do and why he's been able to have success against the Ravens.
So let's update now another storyline this week about Big Ben, and that is the foot injury that he came out of Sunday's game with. Tell us what's the latest on that.
Randy, he sprained the foot on the first series of the game, and so he played the entire game with his foot being injured. And, of course, we saw him on that big 3rd and 17 scramble for 18 yards. But it wasn't just his foot. On one of the pile-ups when he was sacked, he also injured his knee where they were kind of tugging at him and kind of roughing him up a little bit, on which no penalty was called. And so he had both of those factors going against him. He's wearing a protective boot right now, but that's precautionary. Everything they saw yesterday with the examination, everything that went on yesterday, they feel so far so good. He probably won't practice tomorrow, and he'll be limited, but they fully expect him to play. But the key will be once he gets on the practice field and see how that foot feels. But right now they're optimistic, and they feel good about where, the condition of that foot.
Now, Gerry, obviously games aren't played on paper, but when you look at last Sunday's game against the Bills, you look at the statistics, the time of possession, the 3rd down conversions, things like that, you would have gotten the impression that the Steelers should have won that game going away, and yet they were a drop pass away in overtime from a defeat. How was the game that close?
You know, Randy, they did the same thing last year against the Cincinnati Bengals in Cincinnati. Totally dominated the game in the first half. The yards were like 240 to 50, much like it was against the Bills. The score was 13-0, just like it was against the Bills. And, you know, even at the start of the second half, James Harrison makes a big play, causes a fumble. Troy Polamalu recovers, and you think, okay, the Bills aren't going to score in this game, but they just managed to hang around. They hit that middle screen to Fred Jackson, and then the Steelers, you know, a couple penalties hurt them, wiped out some big plays by Rashard Mendenhall and Hines Ward, and next thing you know, it goes to overtime, and it comes down to that drop pass. But don't forget, Emmanuel Sanders dropped an easy pass on 3rd and 8. Not only would have made the first down, he probably would have scored a touchdown on the play. He dropped it, and that's why it went to overtime. And then, of course, Stevie Johnson turns around and drops the ball for the Bills.
All right, let's close it out by getting back to Sunday night. Give us one key to watch for in the big game Sunday night that you're really going to be paying close attention to.
You know, I think it's going to be Ben Roethlisberger and Ed Reed, Randy. You know, Ed Reed hasn't been back very long. He already has 4 picks. I don't have to sit here and tell you how good he is. He's never intercepted Ben Roethlisberger because Ben Roethlisberger does a good job of always knowing where Ed Reed is on the football field. And when you talk about why he's been able to have success against the Ravens, that might be part of it. And so I think that will be the big key to see where, Ben Roethlisberger's pre-snap reads and where he goes with the ball, I think will be maybe the determining factor in his ball game.